Hi everybody, welcome. Cheers. It's night, evening 2 of the Crown Hill Journey, and I hope that you had a good day. I had a wonderful day. I worked hard, did a lot of good work for my clients, ate good food, which isn't always the case these days, and I got out for a walk. I'm determined each day I'm going to get out and walk and get back into a healthier routine. So I hope your day was good as well. I wanted to just say thank you to everyone who watched last night or who watched today during the day of day 1 of the Crown Hill Journey. I hope you really enjoyed it, and if you weren't able to join us last night, please feel free to go to my Facebook page right where you are right now and watch yesterday's edition and then tonight. We will read this book by the end of April. There will be 4 nights where we'll read 2 chapters because they're short, but that will allow us to go through every chapter and be done with the book by April 30th. And then my hope is in the beginning of May to do a talk back where you send me your questions and I answer, and maybe if we're really lucky I can get the medium who worked with me on this book to come and visit as well. I'm in my office and I've tried to make this a cozy space. I hope you feel that. I hope that comes across. It's low lighting despite the fact that there's this big white light on my face so you can see me. I hope you can hear me well. I think everything is good. There's music playing in the background. I don't know if you can hear that, but we'll work on those things. And one thing I did want to tell you about the Christmas tree. Someone asked me about it today. That was my parents' tree when I was a kid growing up. We had a real tree for a few years, but it didn't work out so well. So my parents went to an artificial tree, and it's the first Christmas tree that my daughter had. We were away when she was born, and so we came home to my parents to celebrate Christmas. So it's a very special tree in my life, and now it's decorated with ornaments from around the country where I've gone and visited people and friends, as well as ornaments that are very special from people who gave them to me for this tree. So I keep it up year round, and I'm happy to share it. That was one of the reasons I'm in my office, so I could share that with you. Tonight, you are going to meet Edward Randall. Last night, we read book 1, which was Mary's book. 1 chapter, that's all, because Mary deserved that whole section to herself. She will follow us through the entire book. Edward Randall gets 14 chapters, along with his wife and 2 daughters, and some new characters that will join him at Crown Hill as we move through this second book. I will tell you, I met Edward Randall. He's a real person, he and his wife, and they had 3 children, 2 daughters and a son. Their son died about 4 days after he was born. The one daughter moved away, but the other daughter and the son and both Edward and his wife are buried here in Buffalo in Forest Lawn Cemetery. I learned about Edward from a phone call I got as I've talked about this, moving into this house myself. I got a phone call one night and I answered the phone and I heard a gentleman say, "Can I talk to Christina Apt?" And I said, "This is Christina." He said, "This is Ferris Randall." As I came to find out, Ferris Randall is a stalwart in the town of Eden, used to run the insurance agency, and just a wonderful, wonderful man, a great storyteller with many stories to tell. And when he called me that night, he said, "Did you know that I don't know if it was great uncle or great cousin, it was a distant relation, used to own your house?" And I said, "No, I didn't." He said, "Yeah, he was an attorney in Buffalo. Big deal. He was a big deal. And he used your house as his summer home." I said, "No, I didn't know that. That's really interesting." He goes, "Yeah, did you know there's ghosts in that house?" Which is kind of my life that I lived at Crown Hill. People were always happy to tell me those stories. As we went on, I told Ferris I did not know about the ghosts in my house, and he went on to tell me that Edward Randall wrote 5 books about ghosts and spiritualism that he said were in a collection at the University of Michigan, in the archives in a special collection. I actually did get to go to the University of Michigan and went into their special collections and read through 600 letters of correspondence that Edward wrote and his wife wrote, and it was pretty fascinating. So I'm grateful for Ferris Randall for coming into my life and telling me about Edward, and I think it's time for you to meet Edward and his family. So a quick glass of wine. I hope you have a glass of tea or a glass of water or your own glass of wine. And let's begin. Crown Hill, a novel of love, life, and the afterlife. Book 2, Edward. Chapter 1. July 6th, 1922. Edward Randall strode down the mahogany-paneled hallway connecting his firm's boardroom with his office. A powerful man, both in stature and demeanor, Edward had just completed a marathon series of business meetings with officials from the American Superpower Corporation, the Superpower Syndicate, the Niagara Terminals Building, the Cataract Development Corporation, the South Buffalo Gas Corporation, the Eureka Smelting Company, and Pressed Air Corporation. It had been an exhausting but necessary process. Now, with his immediate business concerns concluded and his law docket clear of pending cases, Edward could confidently take leave of his Buffalo office to join his family at Crown Hill. Thoughts of his family's summer home generated comforting images in Edward's mind. He loved their hilltop sanctuary set outside of Eden's rural township. He savored the peace and tranquility that he and his wife and children enjoyed there. The only real challenge in retreating to Crown Hill was carving out the time away from his busy law practice. Edward Randall was recognized throughout Buffalo and the state of New York as an astute businessman and a successful attorney. It was a professional reputation he had earned over a number of years and which he highly valued. Yet, in the late 1890s, Edward earned repute within a vastly different realm, one directly connected to a woman named Emily French. Miss French resided in the nearby city of Rochester, New York, some 90 miles beyond Buffalo's eastern boundary. On the occasion of Edward and Emily's first meeting, the slight-built woman was in her 62nd year, partially deaf and struggling with a weakened heart. Yet despite her physical failings, Emily possessed a strong inner ability for which she had become famous. She was a direct voice medium who most regularly channeled the voice of the Seneca Indian chief, Red Jacket. Edward's association with Mrs. French began when he was hired by a group of Buffalo citizens to prove the medium and her powers fraudulent. Ultimately, the skillful attorney was forced to withdraw from the case, as he was unable to accomplish that task. Moreover, in what many in Buffalo described as a bizarre twist of fate, Edward became a devoted disciple of spiritualism and Emily French's greatest supporter. Together, Edward and Emily became experts in the realm of spiritualism, which led to their national renown. Over time, that same renown disassociated Edward from many in Buffalo's business and legal communities. It was a divide that widened as Edward redirected much of his career to validating Emily's medium abilities. Their partnership flourished and continued for 15 years until the occasion of Emily's death in June of 1912. Following her passing, Edward continued to research and write on the topic of spiritualism, although without the gifted medium's presence, his spiritual zeal did begin to fade. Gradually, the once esteemed businessman returned to the world of commerce and finance and reinvigorated his law practice. Yet never did Edward Randall completely lose interest in the spirit world that he and Emily had so fully shared. Through the varied professional peaks and valleys in this time of his life, Edward consistently relied upon the comfort of his devoted family, his wife Maria, and their daughters Virginia and Marion. The Randall family resided in an expansively gracious home on Tudor Place, in the heart of one of Buffalo's most fashionable neighborhoods. As a couple, Maria and Edward swirled through Buffalo society as in-demand salon guests and valued patrons of the community's arts and political societies. In a matter of months, the Randalls would be officially presenting Virginia and Marion at a lavish gala ball, which Maria had been planning for over a year. No doubt it would be the event of Buffalo's 1922 social season. Certainly the focus of many family planning conversations during their Crown Hill summer. Thoughts of such frivolous moments ran through Edward's mind as he passed through his office paneled hallway and entered the outer reception area. There, his secretary, Alice, slowed his purposeful pace. "Mr. Randall, Sir Conan Doyle telephoned," It seems he's in New York City and would like you to talk to you today, if possible. Also, Mrs. Randall just phoned. She asked that you call her right away." Edward's stomach twisted upon hearing of his wife's message. Maria was a sensible woman. She was also very independent and rarely, if ever, telephoned him. The fact that she had contacted him was troubling. The fact that she was calling long distance from Crown Hill made her message worrisome. Edward was a solid hour away from Crown Hill by train, longer by horse and buggy. If something was wrong with his family, there was little he could immediately do to help. Heading to his office, Edward requested that Alice phone his wife at Crown Hill. When the intercom buzzed, Edward swooped to the receiver. "Maria, is everything all right? I was just about to leave." Even with the usual delay in the long-distance telephone transmissions, Edward could sense the turmoil in his wife's voice. "Edward, I have only a moment, as I need to get back to the girls, but I need to tell you about an incident that has upset both the girls and caused me great concern as well." Edward's mind reeled with the possibilities of incident, while his solicitor's practiced logic demanded clarification. Without deliberation, the barrister slipped into his well-practiced courtroom demeanor. "Maria, could you explain directly what it is you mean by incident?" Ignoring her husband's condescending tone, Maria closed her eyes and reimagined the startling sequence of events as they had occurred. "It all began with an early morning knock at the back door. Virginia went to answer and discovered a lovely young girl whom she decided to invite into the kitchen, where Marion and I were baking your favorite elderberry pie." The thought of Maria's flaky crust dessert momentarily distracted Edward, until the sound of his wife's voice refocused his attention. "The young lady introduced herself as Margaret Rose Jennings, but she asked us to call her by her preferred name of Rose. She explained that her mother was recently hired as a nanny for the Spaulding family up the road, and that they lived there on the property. Rose continued that she had been on a walk and in passing by our home was so enchanted by the beauty of Crown Hill that she wanted to stop and meet whoever lived here. She was a bit younger than our girls and quite charming, easily engaging all of us in social pleasantries. As time passed, I was about to ask her if her mother knew of her whereabouts, when without warning whatsoever it happened." Growing increasingly impatient with his detail-oriented wife, Edward spouted, "What happened, Maria? What exactly do you mean by it?" "That's what I'm trying to explain, Edward. In the midst of conversing with Rose, the air in the kitchen suddenly became cold. Not as if a breeze were coming through a window, but more as if a chilling winter's day had invaded the house. The change, of course, startled the girls and put me on edge as well. Yet Rose's reaction was quite different. She pointedly turned away from all of us and became riveted, staring out the kitchen window toward the old woodshed in the yard. As she stared, her body began trembling, as if she were weakening, about to lose consciousness or convulse." Maria paused, both to control her voice and to carefully collect her thoughts. Taking a calming breath, she began again. "Obviously, I was concerned for the young girl's well-being, so I approached her. But as I reached out, she spun and pushed past me, purposely moving from the window to the pantry door. There she stood, rooted, continuing to tremble, sobs now streaming from her being. It was all so disturbing, Edward, truly unlike anything I have ever witnessed, even in the few seances I observed with you and Emily." Hesitant as to how best continue, Maria decided to forge ahead with the remainder of her story, hoping the details would not cause Edward to consider her foolish, or worse yet, irrational. In the midst of all this confusion, the kitchen door to the pantry suddenly sprang open as if someone were trying to force their way into our home. Yet, Edward, as God is my witness, there was not a living soul on the other side of that door. What there was, at least what I believe I saw, was a pale blue light, rather in the shape of an orb. And I know this may sound unimaginable, but the light appeared to move toward Rose. And, well, there's really no other way to describe it. It hovered above her, almost as if it was caressing her. At the same time, the young girl began to speak, repeating the same words over and over. "It's all right. Yes, I'm here now. I'm here." And Edward, as soon as those words left the girl's lips, an undeniable scent of sweet roses filled the room. Feeling unexpectedly dizzy and weak, Maria pulled a chair out from the kitchen table to where she was standing by the wall telephone. As her knees folded beneath her, the determined woman righted her body against the sturdy pressed-back oak chair and resumed. She had to finish telling Edward the story so she could get back to her daughters, who were watching over young Rose. Then, just as it had all occurred, the orb vanished, literally vanishing into nothingness. The kitchen became all at once warm, freed from the frigid state that had kept both the girls and I immobilized. And then, from deep within Rose, came a hauntingly long and soulful wail, followed by her collapse onto the kitchen floor. Maria's last words were distorted by disruptive static on the phone. Advance noticed to Edward that their connection was about to be lost. Long-distance telephone service between Buffalo and Eden, 25 miles apart, was inconsistent at best. To make matters worse, Edward knew that once the line went down, it might be hours before a connection could be reestablished. As he hung up the phone, Edward felt uneasy about the safety of his wife and daughters. He was also more than curious about the young girl of his wife's description. Yet without a phone connection, there was nothing the commanding attorney could do but finish gathering his papers and quickly journey to the train station. With any luck, he would catch the noon train and arrive at Crown Hill within 2 hours. While his mind whirled with the possibilities of all that could happen in that time, his thoughts instinctively turned to a collection of memories, recollections that centered upon his friend and spiritual guide, Emily French. And now, which I didn't explain in the beginning, at the end of every chapter, the house becomes the voice of the book, guiding you through the rest, guiding you through the story. So this is now the house. The time following Mary's death was intensely painful for both of us. For my part, Owen remained living within my shelter, and as he had been cruel to his wife, he was equally unkind to me. He continued in his selfish ways, allowing me to fall into filth and disrepair until my spirit became overburdened with the darkness of his being. For that reason, neighbors and friends who had been a constant during Mary's life no longer cared to enter into or enjoy my welcome. Adding to the turmoil, Doc Shaw officially decreed Mary's death a suicide, in complete opposition to what most of Eden believed, that Owen had murdered his loving wife. Consequently, on full moon nights, long after Mary's passing, neighboring children would gather outside my walls and derisively tempt her spirit to appear. And although they never witnessed her, Mary's spirit was indeed present and deeply tortured by their mocking taunts. Dear house, I cannot tolerate the cruelty of these gatherings. Mary would lament the children's jeers. If I were to appear just once, I'm sure they would all go away. Mary's heart-wrenching pain impacted me as if infused directly into my being. To soften our shared anguish, I offered caring consolation. Sweet friend, stay within me, silent if you will. In return, I will bring you echoes from our past, comforting piano music that you once created within me. Hear your soothing melodies. Allow the music to wash over your spirit and bring you peace. Sadly, no matter the enduring love and support that I offered, it was never enough to completely ease Mary's pain. Eventually, in unrelenting agony, she became hardened, bitter, and angry, lashing out and haunting those around and within me. She began first with Owen, literally haunting him to death. It was a vindictive act, far removed from the true heart of my Mary. But I understood it as an uncontrollable response to the many years of cruel words and hurtful actions he'd taken against her. Mary next haunted Owen's father, Richard, who took possession of my deed following his son's passing. Although devoted to her father-in-law in life, Mary's vengeful spirit tortured Richard without regard. As a result, he sold me into a progressive chain of deed holders that numbered 15 in 20 years. And despite my best effort to calm her fury and restrain her resentment, Mary terrified every one of them. In time, Mary's deep desire to pass became overshadowed by the pain of trying. It was a terrible plight, one that wounded me as well. No matter who claimed me as their home, no matter how I tried to create for them a place of calm and caring, I could never reassure them to the point that they could accept Mary's spirit or abide her tortures. As the town of Eden and her people became aware of Mary's hauntings, they soon branded me as a place of unhappiness and suspicion. That repute eventually made it impossible for any living being to willingly reside within my walls. To my great despair, for years, no one believed that I had anything to offer other than horror. And so I languished, empty and alone, except for the tormented spirit of my beloved Mary. So that is the end of Edward's first chapter. I'm sorry I didn't tell you ahead of time that the house came in. From now on, at the end of every chapter, the house will come in. I'm not 100% sure of the house's voice yet. I hope it wasn't annoying. I'm getting used to it. I've never done a book where I've done multiple voices, so this is a learning curve for me. But the story is mine, and I'm passionate about it, so I hope that that comes across and entertains you. Also know that I will try to give you background each time before we start. And if you have questions, please feel free to ask in the comment section of this video or message me personally. I am so excited to do this for you. I have not read this book since I wrote it, and that was 2014. So this is a journey for me as well as for you. I am re-meeting these characters and becoming engaged with them. And as I read and practice whatever I'm going to read to you that night, it's like coming back home for a reunion with people that I knew and that I created. So I thank you for joining me tonight. I hope it was a good chapter for you. I'll be back here tomorrow night at 7:30 for chapter 2 of Edward. You're going to hear more about Maria and the girls. and see them act as a family, and you're going to meet a lot. We're going to learn a lot more about young Rose. So thank you. Have a great night, and I'll see you tomorrow night. I hope you enjoy the Crown Hill Journey.